crazy.
All right, just make sure you speak into that.
Speak into this.
Put your silly face closer to the mic. Fuck. Okay. Silent.
Silent with the phone.
Yeah. This fucking insurance agency keeps calling me, but they're from Baltimore, and I haven't lived there in several years.
Why are they calling you from Baltimore?
I don't know.
They don't want to give you a job?
Yeah. Whatever. Anyways. So the
Guilin.
province, where is that located?
Guilin is in the Guangxi province in southern China. So if you're looking at a map of China and you can see Guangzhou, it's about...
That's one of the big whatever cities or whatever.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones, because I mean the main ones along the Chinese coast, I mean people will argue with me about this, but Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, and Hong Kong obviously, but that's its own separate beast. But so Guilin is northwest of there. It's in the Guangxi province, so it's not in the same, because I think Guangzhou is in the Guangdong province and Guilin is in the Guangxi province.
Is that closer to Mongolia or is that closer to like Hong Kong? 'Cause Hong Kong's on the southern coast. Right?
Yeah, Hong Kong's on the southern coast. Guilin is not close to the southern coast, but it's closer to. It's northwest. So if you're looking at a map, Guangzhou is probably like here. Yeah, Guangzhou is probably like here, and then Guilin's up there. It's a smaller city of only 1 million people.
So it's on Guangzhou is on the southern.
Yeah, it's on the coast. But if you see, let me look at this real fast. Guilin is like.
It's more towards the middle.
Yeah, why don't you just go to Google Maps?
I don't know.
I don't understand my computers. It just baffles me. All right. It's like right over.
So it's right near Hong Kong.
Yeah, I mean, I took a train there last summer when I lived in China. So for the 4th of July, my friends and I, we decided we were going to go to Hong Kong because we all needed to reset our visas because the Chinese government only issued us 60-day visas, but we were staying in the country for basically 90 days.
Yeah.
So we had to go to Hong Kong at some point. So for 4th of July, we went to Hong Kong, reset our visas, and came back to the country for the rest of the summer. So we took a train. It was one of the new high-speed trains. Super nice. Yeah. Granted, it was nice as in it was nice as in it was new, and the facilities were semi-clean. However, I mean, you've been to Asia. Traveling in Asia is not exactly.
Yeah. What they say is first class is more like
our coach.
Yeah. Not to be pompous or anything,
but it totally is. I mean, we were sitting in basically the back of the train, and it felt like we were in a kindergarten where there's kids just running and screaming up and down the aisle. Some of them would stop and just stare at us.
Yeah. So how long you were in China for? It was like close to 90 days. Because I remember you left in beginning of June.
I left at the beginning of basically at the beginning of May. I was there for 13 weeks in total. I spent 12 weeks studying Chinese and then another full week with my parents where we went to Xi'an and then Beijing.
Xi'an's in the center of the country.
Yeah, it's like north central. It's a really interesting city actually, but
because I remember learning about that in Chinese class and they were just like, yeah, basically they're building a new New York City in Xi'an because it's fucking huge.
Yep.
They're just
building so much stuff.
From like what my Chinese teacher told me, like they don't have like anybody to occupy these places.
Mm-hmm.
They just build shit.
There's plenty of Vice documentaries out there that are fascinating, but even Australian 60 Minutes did something about it years and years ago. 60 Minutes in the United States did something about it years and years ago. There are these vast, empty ghost towns all across the country, and people are saying, oh, the Chinese housing market's going to collapse. Well, the Chinese housing market works a little different than ours, but the most interesting thing is China has the highest urbanization rate of anywhere in the world. We are currently witnessing the largest mass migration ever throughout human history of people moving from the countrysides to the city because China has the highest population in the world, and now you have all these people that are getting rich in the countryside, and now they're coming into the cities.
How are they getting rich in the countryside?
Farming, mining, different corporations, and even factories are starting to move out into the countryside because the city's getting they're expensive. But even if they're not getting rich in the countryside, they're hearing about the people that have jobs, that have stable employment in the city, and they're just picking up and moving into the city.
So if these people are getting rich in the countryside, why are they moving towards?
It's the same reason why somebody starts getting money outside of New York and decides, I'm going to go live in New York City, because nobody wants to.
Yeah.
I guess getting rich is the bad way to put it, but they have more money now, so they can actually move, and the Chinese government's letting them move around. You don't need papers to go every single place.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got these cities just exploding in population. So, it's kind of smart for them to build all these ghost towns, because eventually the cities are going to get overcrowded and people are going to want to move, and now they have all these ghost towns people can go rent. But you'd be better off building construction inside the city itself or expanding the city, because nobody really wants to go be the first person to set up a city. It does sound really nice to us, but they think differently than us. Not to sound racist, but that's just the facts.
So you said you were in Xi'an, then?
Yeah, I was in Xi'an for...
It says there's 4.4 million people in there.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
In that city?
Yeah. That might just be just the city. The metropolitan area in itself could have who knows how many. 50 million people even.
See, I just don't understand why China just doesn't split up into 4 different countries.
Well, it's always been 4 different countries. And if you look at China,
culturally, they have the Han Chinese.
Yeah, you have the ethnic Han, and I think you have the Min, and then you have all of these minority regions in the south, and that's why I forget how they classify them, but there's different types of administrative regions in China. So, Beijing, Shanghai, and a couple other places are basically just city-states within China, and then you have areas with a lot of minorities that are governed differently by the central government. They're giving much more autonomy in their decision-making and their spending because they have a much higher minority rate. And then you have the regions, mainly up in the north, that consist of ethnic Han Chinese, where they're just straight-up states, basically, where they're governed directly by Beijing, and their autonomy is pretty low. So, and then you have the special administrative regions like Hong Kong and Macau, Oman. So Hong Kong and Macau, that they play by their entirely different set of rules.
And same with Taiwan, right?
Well, Taiwan's not part of China.
Well, depending on who you ask.
Depending on who you ask, it's part of China. So Taiwan is technically, Taiwan is northeast of Hong Kong, and it's across from... I forget what it's across from. But anyway, Taiwan actually consists of 4 or 5 different islands. So you have the main island of Taiwan, and then you have a whole bunch of islands very close to the actual Chinese mainland. And if you look in the 1950s, I want to say, the U.S. and China almost went to war over Taiwan and these small islands that the mainland China was shelling to prep for invasion. And the U.S. showed up in the Taiwan Strait with a whole bunch of aircraft carriers and said, "Not today."
They didn't want them fighting. We didn't want them fighting with each other. Or we didn't want them taking over Taiwan.
Taiwan's a really strategic thorn in China's side for us. So we like having Taiwan right there because it distracts China, and it could be used as an aircraft carrier, basically as a stable aircraft carrier.
In case we ever want to blow up China.
Yeah, China has one of the world's largest militaries. Granted, their planes aren't the best thing in the world, but they've had so many. It's like that old adage, 1,000,000 guys with knives can take down 100 with machine guns. Or 1 guy with a machine gun.
And they've got 1,000,000 people to spare.
Yeah. When I was living in China, a tragedy for us, while I was there on the Yellow River, Yangtze River, a boat containing Chinese people, 430 people, flipped over, all of them died. On CNN, in this country, on CNN, NBC, Fox, we'd be hearing about that for weeks, if not months, about how this boat flipped over and all these people died. We'd have interviews with their families. We'd have new safety regulations being passed.
It's just a daily occurrence.
They were just like, shit happens. That's literally what they said to me. They were like, it happens. Oh, well. Yeah. 400 people died. They're like, pfft. But you got to look at it differently when you have 1.3 billion people in your country.
And also, we just take tragedy differently here.
Yeah.
Just in general. But yeah, there was that plane crash in Taiwan. Wasn't there one last year, or Taipei?
Yeah.
I guess it was going from the Chinese mainland to Taiwan or something, and it just one of the engines cut out.
Yeah.
And
I'm pretty sure.
I heard about that one on the news, but maybe that's because it involved Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean, Taiwan's got much more Western involvement because... Well, the other thing is, the Chinese government plays the media very well, where if the Western media wants into the country and they want to publish stories about it, they have to be very careful with how much they criticize the Chinese government. If you
Well,
are...
they're on Facebook too, so
Yeah. But I
that
mean...
tells you anything.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if we stay in some places, like in Beijing or some of the other places with a lot of international visitors, you'll get Western channels. But even there, they're very careful about what they say, because if they don't toe the line, they'll get thrown out of the country, and then you're thrown out of the world's rising superpowers' entire news network, and you're relying on other party sources that you have to cite, which takes away credibility from your knowledge about the country.
So China is basically just like a more reasonable North Korea.
Yeah, I mean...
That explains why you're so in love with it.
I mean, more reasonable North Korea in the fact that they play international politics really well. However, I think what they're doing in the South China Sea is really stupid, because their whole philosophy for the past 20, 30 years at least has been basically in the international community, don't intervene in other people's problems. Just sit there, make a whole bunch of money, and chill.
Yeah.
But recently with the South China Sea, where they're building these islands, parking oil rigs off of one of their allies, Vietnam, they're parking an oil rig right in Vietnamese claimed water, and they're like, what are you going to do about it? And you see daily conflicts between Indonesian and Chinese maritime forces. You're seeing all these daily conflicts between Chinese and Southeast Asian forces that the question becomes, when does China take it too far? Because, I mean, we are the main security guarantor in the South China Sea. So when does China take it too far? When do they push the envelope just a little too much? But the thing that... It's a dumb idea for them to do it because it brings more attention to their country and what they're doing, and it makes more people around them more afraid. Because, I mean, right now the U.S. has been trying to surround China with our allies and our forces, so that way we basically encircle them. But now China's even undercutting their relationship with Vietnam, which is not good for them, because after the Vietnam War between the U.S. and Vietnam, we left, and then China and Vietnam actually went to war for one point. Vietnam butchered China. I'm not saying that's what's happened today, but China can't afford to fight a war on all fronts, basically. So the question is, when do they push the envelope too much? But the thing they're doing that's really smart about it is they're not doing a whole bunch of stuff at once. It's more like slowly doing a few things, then backing off, then doing a few more things, then backing off a little bit.
Like in terms of attacking?
Well, it's not really attacking. It's more like building islands or making aggressive moves, like planting an oil rig or doing this other stuff. Because, I mean, now they're planning an oil rig. Or, I mean, I don't know if it's actually back yet, but they did plan an oil rig, and then before they even started the process, the Vietnamese government got all up in arms. So they moved the oil rig back, but they didn't move it back all the way. They moved it back a little bit, like not all the way into Chinese territory, but just enough.
They're just like pestering. Yeah. No, I think a lot of people are scared about North Korea, but I feel like China is obviously a way more imposing factor. And if World War III were to ever happen, it's probably going to start in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Or in Asia in general.
Well, the really big question is what happens between China and Japan over the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands, which we've all pretty much forgotten about because they're not doing as much there anymore. But I mean, we are obligated to come to Japan's defense if they ever get attacked. And who would we say that against? It was against China. So the real question is, say a Chinese warship runs aground in the Diaoyu Islands or the Senkaku Islands, whichever you want to call it. I forget which one likes which, but say a Chinese warship runs aground. Japan declares war on China, and then we have to go to war to help Japan. And it's only actually getting more dangerous that the conflicts may arise between them because Japan is reinterpreting its Article 9 in its constitution, which states that Japanese forces cannot be deployed overseas. Granted, they were deployed overseas in Afghanistan, but that's totally different. It was a very small force. But now they've reinterpreted the entire Article 9, and now Japanese forces can be deployed for self-defense purposes without being on Japan. So basically, like, how we justified the Iraq War as a preemptive defense war. Japan can now do that. And Japan's military is no joke, but...
China's is way bigger.
Oh, yeah, China's is way bigger. I mean,
Yeah.
but even then, the Chinese government, I would wager the Chinese military is still 15, 20 years behind us in terms of military technology and training, because we've... Say what you will about the 2 wars we've been embroiled in and all the conflicts we've partaken in over the past 30 years or so. Our forces have been flying aircraft carriers in combat. They've been learning what goes right and what goes wrong in combat, what should be fixed, what systems need to be optimized. Whereas the Chinese government, Chinese military, they haven't fired a shot against another nation who knows how many years. I mean, Vietnam was probably the last one that I can think of off the top of my head.
That was 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no joke. It's no coincidence that the best militaries in the world are the ones that are always at war.
Yeah. I mean, they learn what to do. Well, actually, the really interesting thing is Russia's military. This is totally getting off subject, but Russia's military is a hollow shell of what it once was.
Yeah.
It's actually hollowed out by drug use, alcohol abuse. HIV is a huge thing, too, in Russia, because people are sharing needles, and even though homosexuality is a crime...
They're all doing heroin and butt-fucking each other.
Not even heroin. Crocodile. That's the new one. The drug that literally kills
I've
you.
heard about that.
Crocodile is a drug that they inject in, the Russian guys will inject into their arms, and it'll turn your skin green and scaly, basically, before it falls off.
And the point of that is, gets you high.
I guess, but, I mean, it literally is killing them, and they're just sitting there like, yeah, why the fuck not?
Yeah, I feel like weather has a part to do in why Russians are always so mean.
Yeah, I mean, they live in one of the coldest and most depressing areas in the world. If you've ever been
You need
to
some
Russia...
vitamin D.
Yeah, no, I mean, they do, but which is actually really interesting because now that the Earth is getting warmer, all that permafrost in Siberia is melting.
Yeah.
So they now have a whole bunch of more arable land to work with.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And Putin and the Russian government actually just gave Russian families gave out millions of acres of land across Siberia for Russian families to go farm and grow, because every year there are less and less Russians. Russia's population is actually shrinking, down from 500 million. No, they're not 500 million anymore. We have more citizens than they do.
Third,
Yeah.
We're above 350 million.
Yeah, because
So they
it's
gotta be
China,
around 300
India.
U.S.
Yeah, I think they're at like 150 million, which is crazy for how massive of a country they are.
Yeah, but I mean, half of it's like in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah, half of it's
basically.
fucking ice and shit.
Yeah. But with the weather, with the global climate change, they've got a lot more to work with.
Yeah, and
But like, I'm just looking at a map of Russia right now, and it's just fucking.
it's
huge.
massive. I mean, this is the interesting projection of it, because this projection of a world map always makes a lot of countries seem bigger than they actually are.
Yeah.
Russia's not actually this big, but I mean,
And the U.S. is probably much bigger than it actually is.
yeah. But I mean, if you look at like all of this right here is basically the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do there, but all of this is newly arable land.
Yeah. I just never think of anybody living past like that point.
That's basically
Like one quarter towards of Russia towards the.
Once you get
Europe.
beyond the Ural Mountains, there's pretty much nothing, and it's just nothing and nothing and nothing and nothing.
One thing about Russia that's cool is they have the Trans-Siberian Railroad.
Yeah, I've always wanted to take that, but I don't.
Somebody in Peru that took that, and they went through, like parts of Russia, and then I guess it goes through like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, I guess, all the old parts of the USSR.
Yeah.
That's fucking insane.
They're actually building a new one too. That's supposed to take half the time, but the funny thing is,
It's gonna take longer though.
I wouldn't. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be on the Trans-Siberian Railway for long.
Bandits.
It's not even. I mean, the rule of law in that country is terrible. It's not safe.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are some people that have been to Russia or that live in Russia that will argue with me differently, but I went to Russia when I was a kid, and we weren't allowed to leave the hotel. We weren't allowed to go anywhere without.
Well, it's also probably because you're a U.S. citizen.
That's true.
That makes it.
I mean, Americans are everywhere you go, you're an American. People are going to mark you as rich and.
Especially Russia.
Yeah. But I mean, if you're going to go to Central Asia, I would go pretty much right now before it entirely destabilizes. Like,
I don't know. It's pretty fucked up, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, Kazakhstan, all of these countries right here, these Central Asian countries, even Azerbaijan or Armenia, and Russia to a lesser extent. All of them, none of them are really democracies. All of them have democracies by name, but they're basically dictators.
Oligarchies.
Oh God, what's his name? Nursultan no, not Nazarbayev. Maybe it is Nazarbayev. Anyways, the president, I put air quotations there, of Kazakhstan, he...
Prime Minister.
Premier, president for life, just like Lukashenko in Belarus. They're presidents for life. But he's been in power since before the Soviet Union collapsed, and he's still in power. And the guy's like 80-something years old.
Yeah, it's like Castro.
Yeah, but at least Castro put his brother in power. These countries have no plan of succession. So in the United States, we have an election every 4 years. Awesome. The president loses, new president comes into power, that previous president gives up power, and we just keep on going.
Yeah.
When Nazarbayev or whoever is in charge of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, when they die, there is no succession plan. They're going to start from scratch. And if you think Game of Thrones is fucked, it's going to be like a whole other thing in this country where you can have all these factions that all of a sudden have a chance to grab power. I mean, you're going to see something like Syria on a grander scale in a country that may or may not have nuclear weapons sponsored and right on Russia's doorstep. And it's not like Russia has... Well, Russia does have the ability to flex its muscle there, but I mean, imagine the power conflict between China and Russia right here. All of a sudden, Kazakhstan, this major node for transportation into Europe, and natural gas is up for grabs. Yeah.
This is a very volatile place in there.
Yeah, and
it's very scary.
I mean, you look at
in our lifetime, we're probably going to see it all collapse.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all these borders are entirely artificial. Stalin drew these borders on for a very deliberate purpose to divide the ethnic minorities, have them play off each other, so that way he could always step in and play the role of mediator and crush any sort of dissent against him. No one minority could unite against him and take him down or cause him a giant rebellion.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but the really interesting thing is what China's doing right here in Central Asia and the Middle East, especially in Pakistan. They're starting the whole new Silk Road initiative where they're basically building these giant highways and trains across and railways across Central Asia and guaranteeing their security. So they're providing money, jobs, and security to all of these Central Asian countries, which is making their influence, go through the roof. And most of these countries actually signed on to the new, I forget what it's called, Russia's response to the EU, Eurasian Economic Union. Yeah, they signed on to that, and Russia was supposed to be the main economic heft behind it. Well, if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the world today, Russia's economy is in the shitter.
Yeah.
The only country that's doing semi-okay right now is Belarus. And who knows how much longer Lukashenko is going to remain in power and what their orientation towards the West will be. Because Belarus has been described as the crossroads between Russia and Europe, and it's very accurately called that because it's right here.
Yeah.
So you've had Lukashenko, who's been in power since 1997? 93. He's been in power since 93. He knows how to play the politics game really well. And recently he's been opening up his country to the West, offering limited democratization reforms and releasing political prisoners, making his political capital in the West a lot higher. So even the United States, we're talking about going in there with jobs, and they've got one of the fastest growing economies in the former Soviet bloc. Belarus, yeah.
Wow. I don't hear much about them.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because they're right behind India in IT services and telecommunications.
Really?
Telecommunications, they're opening.
Why would IBM want to put a fucking help center in Belarus?
Cheap labor.
Yeah, but India's right there.
Yeah, but people might be some people might be more receptive to somebody with sort of a Slavic accent than somebody with a Hindi accent.
We've already stereotyped the shit out of
Yeah. But, maybe it's even cheaper labor and Belarus has better trained employees, and that's another thing you have to look at, because Belarus has a better education system than I don't know that for a fact, so I won't say that, but Belarus is a very good education system, whereas
They have less people.
yeah, they've got less people, they can control, they can manage more, whereas India does have has a world-renowned university system, but they also have a lot of low-skilled labor. Belarus is like medium to high skilled, not high skilled, but low to medium skilled labor. So they can have their own military-industrial complex with no problem. They can, I guess I shouldn't say no problem, but they can start their own military-industrial complex. They can have IT help centers. They can have telecommunication enterprises. Whereas some of the other countries, not so much. But so anyways. Back to China. Sorry for that total digression.
So when do you leave? You leave in early July?
I leave July 8th, and I won't be back until early September, because September 11th, I'm taking the Chinese government's HSK Chinese proficiency test, level 4. I'm taking the level 4 version, which is like...
That's pretty hard.
It's not going to be easy. It's native speaker... some college education. It's pretty much like the standard.
Native speaker.
Some college, like
Chinese.
yeah, some.
Shit, so you gotta be like fluent.
Yeah, I forget the character requirement, but HSK level 4 is basically like I could live in China, I can do all this other stuff. Granted, I could already live in China, but sometimes I need to sit there on my phone and go, how do I draw this character? What is this? So HSK level 4, there's 6 levels in the HSK system. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would be going for 4. 5 is like our equivalent would be native speaker, English degree in college, and then 6 is like native speaker, English degree in college, studied classics and literature, for a PhD.
So that's the goal. 6.
You're way ahead of me. Right now, I'd like to get 4 by September. Come back, get a job somewhere that values a Chinese speaker, wherever that might be.
Yeah.
And then, actually, when I go home this weekend, I'm going to be practicing my Russian.
Why is that?
Well, my girlfriend actually got me Rosetta Stone for Russian, and I've been working on that a little bit here and there. So my goal is to have Chinese level 4, and then practice Russian and get semi-fluent in Russian before I apply to any sort of government or translator role, because those are 2 critical languages in the U.S. government.
Rosetta Stone for Russian. Russian's got to be fucking hard.
Oh, it's good.
Do you learn the alphabet through Rosetta Stone, or is it just speaking?
It's a lot of speaking and a lot of reading, very little writing. But the hardest part is just the grammar. The grammar is fucking impossible.
Why'd you just jump to Chinese and Russian?
Well, I took Spanish in California, and Spanish bored me to death. And I hated Spanish and French, because I took French in high school. Yeah. And I hated those languages because they have all this gender and conjugation and past participle and future, and all that drove me insane. Chinese grammar is literally the easiest grammar you will ever read and try to understand in your life.
I don't know. I took Chinese. It was pretty damn hard.
Well, that's because the tones are probably the hardest part, and the character.
You have to get rid of all your understanding of Germanic and Romance languages before you can understand an Asian language. Because if you try to say in Chinese you reverse the verb and the adjective in the pronoun or something, and whatever.
Chinese is every sentence structure is subject, time, verb, object. Sometimes it's subject, time, place, verb, object.
Yeah, because it relates it too much to English.
It's weirdly close, but at the same time not at all the same. So if I was saying today I'm going home. 今天我会回家. Today, you can change subject and time. So today, 今天I will 回家, return home.
Yeah, it's all backwards. The tones bucked me up there.
Yeah.
Because they
but
have like 4 different tones or something. Where you
yeah,
go down.
and that's just
up.
Mandarin. Mandarin has 4 tones. Cantonese has like 8. Vietnamese, I think, has like 9 or 10, something like that.
Vietnamese just sounds like Klingon.
Yeah. Yeah. Vietnamese.
Thai.
Oh,
It's crazy, Steve.
they're out. All right. Chinese characters kind of baffle me, but they make the simplified Chinese characters are starting to make sense to me. But I look at Vietnamese or Thai, and I sit there like, what?
Well, because it looks like Arabic.
Yeah, it almost looks like Arabic, but it makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, those like those language or those writing languages like Chinese, not Chinese, Thai, and Khmer, and like Arabic. They all look like so beautiful though.
Yeah,
it looks like Elvish from like.
I mean, it looks beautiful, but I just sit there and I go, Arabic looks like a bunch of squiggly lines. And I'm sure that if you're able to write or speak Arabic, it makes so much sense to you.
Yeah.
Awesome. However, I just look at it and go, what if you mess up a squiggle?
Yeah.
Then it's a totally different word.
Chinese.
Yeah.
If you're like,
if one of the things isn't slanted enough, it means a totally different thing. Yeah, I had my Chinese teacher last year. One of my Chinese professors last year in China. We spent a full hour in class practicing writing 4 characters.
Yeah. And there's 3,000 of them or something.
Oh, there's so much more. The worst, honestly, one of the hardest part about Chinese is when either one word goes for 2 characters and they mean 2 different things, but the word is the same tone, or one character is for 2 words and it's the same character and it's the same tone and it's all context, and you sit there and you go, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, fuck that. I've just been trying to learn Spanish the past few months.
Spanish bores me to death, and I can't stand genders.
So easy.
But is it that easy? I mean, it's got genders. I would rather take Chinese where...
Well, I took French in high school, so like it's sort of... Their gender is sort of the same, where they have just different words for different... You know, if you're a boy or a girl.
Yeah.
But it just makes... I don't know. It makes more sense to me than Chinese did.
But
I took Japanese, though. Japanese is pretty
that's...
crazy, too.
Calvin always wanted me to take Japanese, and then he joked we were going to go sell real estate in China. We were going to sell real estate in Japan. And I was like, I'm totally about it. And then one day he's like, I'm going to go be a podiatrist. All right, Calvin. Thanks, bud.
You could still sell real estate in Japan.
Thought about it.
He could still do it, too.
He could still do it, too, but he
would...
would...
a podiatrist and then a real estate agent on the side. It'll be a side hustle.
He should just go be a podiatrist in Japan, and then we'll start our own craft brewing company.
Yeah.
But,
a lot of businesses to get started on.
I think the most important part is the fact that we're taking languages, because how many Americans can't speak another language is actually really disgraceful. Yeah, but
that's what sucks is because, you know, like, I feel like a lot of Americans want to learn languages.
Yeah.
But they just, if you go to a foreign country, you can easily just speak English to somebody because they're either they want to practice English or it's just easier for you to converse in English.
Yeah.
And then every sign is probably in English anyways.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are like...
a lot of countries it is.
I want to say like Americanized or anglicized signs. So, you know, like around the world, yield is pretty standard looking, or stop signs are pretty standard looking, and they all have traffic lights that are the same, or walk signals, a lot of stuff. Yeah, English is one of the most useful languages in the world, and it's also kind of a curse because people don't push themselves to learn new languages here. And I actually used to hate learning languages. I hated learning French, and then something just clicked with me with Chinese. And then as soon as I started learning Chinese, all of my French just came screaming back to me. So I met a French girl in...
So weird.
I met a French girl in China, and she started talking French, and I was like, holy shit, I can actually understand what she's saying. Speaking French, not talking French.
Yeah.
Damn it.
No, it's so interesting that, like, the language in our brains works that way.
Yeah.
Because, like, you can... Like, same with me, I learned... like, just learning Spanish the past few months, like, I mean, because French and Spanish are pretty similar, but, like, it all just comes, like...
Yeah.
For some reason, I haven't learned it in 4 years or something, and
but
it just comes back.
It just comes screaming back to you.
It's like riding a bike in a way.
Yeah.
Like, you never really forget, but you, like, just because you don't use it, it sort of just leaves your brain.
Yeah.
But when you need it, it can sort of come
It's
back.
still stored there, which, after all the shit that I've done to my brain, you'd think I would be screwed and I would never remember any of that, but...
Yeah. And I'm still trying to get to that point where people say that, like, once you learn that first language, then picking up the second and the third and the fourth is so easy.
I mean,
you gotta get that one.
You gotta get the
one,
first one. You gotta
one
start with the first one.
The hardest one.
I met...
The first one is always the hardest for some reason.
let's see, my friend who was Swiss, he was French, no, he was Swiss Brazilian, French Brazilian, lived in Switzerland. There we go. He spoke most of the Romantic languages except for Romanian, because nobody knows fucking Romanian.
Yeah.
And then he was able to speak Swedish, read Danish, and he's sitting there and like, so I'm sitting there with, I was at a bar in China with 3 international students and myself. It was my first week there, so I'm just glad to be making friends. Well, it's this guy who's the French Brazilian guy, and then you have the Swiss girl who speaks 7 different languages, certified translator in all of them. Yeah. And then you have the kid from Mexico who grew up affluent, and he speaks 5 languages. And I'm sitting there speaking English, and it's my first week in China, so my Chinese is god awful. I studied Chinese for a year here, but even then, 101 and 102 are not proficient enough for you to go to China and be able to speak Chinese for an hour and a half. But I'm sitting there at the bar, I'm sitting there drinking, listening to them switch between 4 or 5 different languages.
Yeah. Just back and forth.
Yeah. And even the Chinese waiter comes over and he starts asking them what they want to drink, and I order in Chinese / I order in my best Chinglish that I had at the time, and he then starts to ask the other guys, and then they start speaking Spanish together, and then they switch back to Chinese, and they switch to English, and I'm sitting there like, oh my god, the American education system has failed me, because the average amount of languages that a European can speak, I think is like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's so many different languages there, and that's something that's been a huge disservice to us, because all we've been taught is either French or Spanish basically our entire lives.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because you think if, like, our education systems are similar, and say you're a kid in France when you're 5 years old and you start learning English, they're probably fluent by, like, 15.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or, like, they can definitely carry a conversation for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
If they've been learning English. But if you're in the States and you've been learning Spanish from the time you're in like 5th grade until you're in 12th grade,
Your Spanish is terrible.
Why don't we know it? Why don't we know Spanish? I
think
don't know
it's
if that's the fault of the student or is that the fault of the American education system.
I think it's usage, because.
But I mean, like if you're in France and you have a French-speaking mom and dad and y'all are French.
But you're still going to hear English all the time. I mean, on TV, in Europe, they have European TV news. I'm sure they're gonna be predisposed to watching French shows, but you're still gonna hear English a lot. Even think of how many English speakers there are in France or in Europe in general.
Yeah.
So you're gonna hear it a lot more. Whereas with Spanish in the United States, how many TV stations do we have that just speak Spanish?
I know
what?
One.
Yeah, 1 or 2. The further south you go, you're going to have more Spanish-speaking radio stations, but still you're not going to have that many. And a lot of those students that are taking Spanish in school are either already Hispanic and can speak Spanish, or have parents that did not take Spanish in school and really don't give a shit about listening to Spanish or watching Spanish TV, so they're not going to get a whole lot of practice. Yeah, we just don't need to.
We hit the lotto. we learn English by the time we're 3.
And I would wager, and I'm sure somebody listening to this or somebody out there will argue with me, but I would argue that English is the hardest language in the world to learn.
That's what I've heard. Because,
Finnish and Estonian and some of those Scandinavian languages, they look like moon runes, and it sounds like they're chipmunks when they're speaking. But English, with all of its grammar and all of our different vocabulary rules and how our pronunciation rules and all the exceptions to all of those rules, and then you have contractions, and then you have just kind of like the native speaking bias. Like if I said something that was really grammatically incorrect, but somebody who'd been studying English for the past 5 years, but still had a really thick accent, they said something that was grammatically incorrect, you would basically understand what I was saying. Yeah. But you would look at them like you have no idea what you're talking about. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like you need to learn more English grammar. Yeah. And then and people say Chinese is tonal, and there's 4 tones in Chinese, and that's very correct. However, I would also wager that I would say that English is more tonal, just because of if I say something like, "Oh, I'm fine," there's obvious sarcasm in there. But if it's like, yeah, I'm fine, or I'm fine, or it's depending on how you say a sentence, it can turn it into a question. How you can turn it.
1,000 of them.
Yeah.
Just where you put the intonation or the emphasis.
Yeah. And as a non-native speaker, good luck picking up on that. That's so hard for them to pick up on that. I mean, I was being sarcastic in China, and I realized very quickly they don't get it. They just don't get it. I had to change that entirely, like, cause I would be like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome," and then they'd be like, "Really? You'd really think that's awesome?" I'm like, "No, I'm being sarcastic here." Like, and
that's crazy that they don't understand.
They don't get it. I mean, Chinese kind of has sarcasm where they elongate their tones, but it's not used that commonly.
Yeah.
We're also much drier and darker people, I would say. Dark humor is much more of a thing here than it is there.
Yeah. It's less slapstick.
Yeah. But, I mean, so I guess the most important message of this podcast would be go out and learn a language.
Yeah, I think that's what we got to do. I mean, you're learning Russian and Chinese now?
Yep.
Would you say you're fluent in Chinese? Or you're proficient?
I'm proficient. I can get around in China. I could live in China if I needed to. If you could drop me in China tomorrow, I could find a hotel room, I could eat, and I could get a plane ticket home.
I mean,
granted,
anybody with a translating dictionary.
You could drop me in like in a village, and I'd do okay.
Okay.
I can even.
So,
I have.
Yeah, that's a true test. If you can be dropped at a rural village where nobody speaks English or any other language.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing is like in southern China, there's an entirely different dialect, and I know a little bit of that dialect too. So I can ask like if you've eaten, which that's actually a really common thing in Chinese, is to ask somebody in the morning like, "Have you eaten today?" Like "Ni chi fan ma?" It's like hello or how's it going in the United States. Like in the United States, you see somebody, how's it going, and you don't really answer. With them, it's have you eaten?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of their culture revolves around food, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And
a lot of Filipino culture does that too, where they're like everything revolves around like eating with your family.
Yeah, and that's it's pretty much every dinner I ever went to, every like meal in China, except for breakfast and some very few dinners, was served family style, and everybody be sitting around the table talking, and we would sit there. Some of the Americans would sit there and be like, "We just want to sit here and eat quietly," but they'd be talking to us and eating.
Yeah, I like that better though.
Yeah, I don't like it though. On one hand, it was really nice. On the other hand, there are some times where I just don't want to talk, and there are some times when I don't want to see what the person next to me is chewing in their mouth while they're chewing it while they're talking to me. And the other thing is,
I wonder how many choking deaths there are.
or the other one is when in China it's considered polite and a compliment to the chef. The louder you smack your lips together, the louder you chew, the louder you slurp.
I want to fucking
and if you burp,
stab somebody whenever they do that. That's so annoying.
It's so incredibly annoying. But I'm
so
sitting.
Do they like exaggerate it when they actually like food? They're just like, that's fucking.
Or slurp, or they'll burp after meal. Like they'll let some rip, and I'm just sitting there like,
yeah,
the fuck. Yeah, and they'll do that, and then it's like, this is how is this? All right, I guess, but that might seem weird. Like they thought it was weird when they were like, "Do you and your family just sometimes sit in silence and eat?" Yeah, why not?
Yeah. We're eating.
Yeah, we're focusing on eating, but and that used to drive me insane. Yeah. Or but some of those little cultural, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Differences.
Yeah. Some of those things some of those cultural differences are actually really interesting. Like when we were in, my friends and I, we were drinking at a night market, which is basically, when I say night market, I mean this guy literally set up plastic chairs, tiny little plastic chairs, and the tables. I love those things because you drink and you like hang out. Well, we were sitting at one of those, and we actually went up and asked the Chinese guy for a cigarette. And then he invited us to come over and sit with him. So we all went over and sat with him, gave me a cigarette. And then I started asking, and then I finished it, and then an hour later or so, I asked him for another one, and my friend, she looked at me because she'd been in China. She's like lived in China for years, and no, she said, once you start smoking somebody's cigarettes, you have to smoke them for the rest of the night. Otherwise, it's offensive. You cannot refuse another cigarette from them.
But he offered it to you, or you asked for another?
I asked one, and then he offered. I asked him for one, and then we came over and sat down, and then I had another one, and then she's like, "No, you can't refuse him for the rest of the night now. It's considered bad manners." So I was just taking his cigarettes. I didn't even ask. He was just giving them out. He just like threw 4 packs on the table and was like smoking. And then
that sucks.
And Gambay is a super interesting thing. I don't know if Southeast Asia has it, but like Gambay it literally translates to like dry cup. So what you do is when somebody says Gambay, you finish your drink.
Just whatever's in it.
Sometimes they have baijiu in it, and baijiu is like basically gasoline, but with a little bit more alcohol in it. It's like if my car was running on empty and I had a bottle of baijiu in the car, I'd go pour it into the gas tank and I'd probably make it another 6 miles. Yeah. So the first time they say Gambay, everybody, including the women, have to finish their drink. The second time they say Gambay, it's optional for the women, and it's highly, strongly, firmly recommended for the men to finish their drinks. So the men have to finish their drinks, otherwise you'll be called the wussy or any of that stuff. Whereas the women, they can sit there and choose, but the guys will still poke fun at them and tease them if they don't finish their drinks.
Yeah. Interesting.
And they'll do that. They'll do that all night long.
Especially to white people.
Yeah. I knew some girls in China. They said they went out to a bar and these Chinese guys came over and bought them like an entire bottle of baijiu, and we're trying to do that to them all night. And eventually the girls were like, "Nope, we're done," and they just left. They're just like, "No, we're done. We can't do any more baijiu." They came back wasted.
Jesus Christ. So are you going to be staying in a university, taking classes?
No, I will be. I'm actually right down the road from Guilin Main University at CLI, Chinese Learning Institute. There's my plug.
I was waiting for one.
There you go.
Twitter. Shout out to Twitter.
Shout out to Twitter. I will literally for 20 hours a week, which doesn't seem like that much, but when you spend 4 to 5 hours every day in a classroom, one-on-one speaking, writing, reading, practicing Chinese in general, there's nothing.
How much you pick it up.
Yeah.
How fast you pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, so at UMW, I finished one book over the course of I finished one Learn Chinese book over the course of 2 semesters. At CLI, I finished 2 of those books. One of them was even bigger over the course of 3 months.
Damn.
Yeah. I went from barely being able to speak Chinese to speak local dialects.
Wait, so you said you finished like how many books here? 2 books?
One book. One book in 2 semesters.
In 2 semesters, okay.
So like we finished the first 5 chapters in 101, and then in 102 we finished the next 5 chapters, and then I went to China and I finished 2 books. Yeah, it's fast. But the other thing is it's mentally exhausting learning another language for 20 hours a day. I've never been more tired than after 5 hours a day in a classroom or 6 hours a day in a class. Because some days I would test out new professors at the school that I was at, because it's not really a school, but it's still accredited by some institutions. Mary Washington being one of them now, because of me actually, which is there you go. I would test out new Chinese teachers, and you sit there, and eventually at hour 6, there were some classes I was literally falling asleep in. I had to start drinking caffeinated tea, so at the end of the day, my brain didn't hurt quite so much. Because I mean, it's a good hurt too. Like I actually felt challenged. I mean, I went to college for 4 years.
I bet you feel like a fucking workout.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus, I need an ice bath for my brain. That's awesome.
And then we'd go to a bar, and I'd sit there, or like we go to a restaurant, or we go to the bar, or we'd go to dinner, and then we'd come back and get a whole bunch of really tall beers that have low ABV. But we'd get a whole bunch of beers, and we'd sit on the roof and drink for the rest of the night, and we'd sit there like, oh, my brain fucking hurts, just hurts, man.
Yeah, I bet you can see a fucking difference there.
Oh, absolutely, especially like the school that I went to. What's really nice is they tailor your entire learning experience to you. So like there was one day, it was like the second week of school, it was the second week of my classes, and I got tired of going to restaurants that I could only look at the pictures and be like, I want to get that. So I finally went up to one of the professors and I was like, teach me how to order food.
Yeah.
So she's
that's
like,
the most important thing you can learn right away. It's
yeah.
so practical.
And then, so what I did, she's like, so your homework tonight is take a picture of the menu and then bring it back to me. So I took a picture of the menu, we brought it back, and she helped me translate the entire menu. She told me, like, this is what this character is, this is what this character is, and then, like, so she helped me translate the entire menu, and then she's like, all right, we're going to practice, and you're going to practice ordering some things with me, and then about 45 minutes, I'm going to take you out to dinner, and you're going to order for both of us.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So we practiced, and then for 45 minutes later, we left the building, we walked down to, like, the cultural walking street, I guess, and went and got this delicious Uyghur Muslim food. No, because they were closed that day because it was something, I forget what it was, but anyways, they were closed that day. So when we went to another place and I was able to read the menu, and then from there on out, I was able to go to different menus. I was basically good to go wherever I wanted to and pick my favorite dishes out off the menu with no problem. And that's so convenient.
Yeah, and that's probably way more useful than spending 5 hours in a classroom.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's better than half of what you might learn.
Yeah, and I mean, it's much more practical for living.
Yeah.
Is to learn how to order food. But I think when I go back, I'm gonna be doing some review. But I think when I go back, I'm gonna be learning how to learn professional vocabulary, like business stuff.
Yeah.
But so yes, learn a language, learn Chinese. Learn Chinese is not as hard as people would believe. Yeah.
Become fluent in a language in less than 6 months.
Yeah.
The Josh Clarke way.
That's the way to graduate school.
Less than 3 months, sorry.
Dude, yeah, so I started taking Chinese in September, and then found out I needed to be at the 300, through the 300 level to graduate with my IR degree. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll spend 12 weeks this summer getting 12 credits.
You got 12 credits for that?
I got
a semester.
1 credit a week for staying there for 3 weeks.
Jeez.
Sorry, staying there for 12 weeks. 1 credit a week for staying there.
Something.
Yeah, I mean, I came back the first or second week and saw my 101 teacher and started talking to her, and just I started speaking Chinese there, no problem. And anytime I saw her on campus, I'd speak Chinese there, and she was like, "Oh my God, your Chinese is fantastic now."
Jesus, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's been like an hour.
Has it?
Yeah.
Fuck, I gotta go back to New Jersey. Oh my God.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for doing it.
Of course.